Hello, thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings Podcast. I'm your host, Paul, and today is Wednesday, June 4th, 2025. This is episode 38. It's crazy that we've already done 38 episodes.
Wow.
Yeah, it feels like it just started like a couple months ago. We started back in December. Yeah, 38 episodes. And for all the listeners, all the support we've been getting, thank you so much for all the feedback. We get a lot of great comments. People send in a lot of emails. Our email address is recoveryrecordings615@yahoo.com. Also, we have a Facebook page, which is 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings Podcast. Find us on Facebook. Send us a friend's request. You can also find us on Audible, Spotify, iHeartRadio, a bunch of other major platforms. We're super excited about tonight's guest. It's been a minute since she's joined us, but we have Katie P. all the way from Austin, Texas. How you doing, Katie?
I'm doing okay. I was sharing that my day kind of went to hell in a handbasket about 20 minutes ago, but this will definitely pull me out of it. So I'm looking forward to talking about some good stuff. Alcoholics Anonymous always makes me happy.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I'm sorry. Well, that's it's not necessarily awesome that your day went to crap, but yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, how you been?
Oh my God, it was one of those things where you just go, oh my God. Then I turned my leaf blower on and it throws everything all over my car. And I was like, forget it. I'm going inside. I'm waiting for Paul to call me and then we'll do this. It seems like whatever I'm touching is breaking. So Charlie used to walk around the house going, maybe one more effing thing could screw up. And it would just crack me up because I'd think, gosh, that's just not my world. And then all his affairs fell in my lap, and I am walking around doing this same thing he was doing. It's like, okay, maybe he had a valid point. There was a lot on his plate, way more than I gave him credit for. Wow. I can tell you that.
Wow. Yeah, it's speaking of Charlie, I think I sent you I think I sent it to you. I found a copy. My wife's sponsor and Jack W. did a retreat this weekend in New Jersey, and Jack had read a spiritual consent thing that Charlie wrote, and I found it today because I loved it, right? And I sent you a copy of it on text, yeah. But that was special, yeah.
I love Jack. He's a great guy.
Yeah, Jack's a cool guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, how about yourself? Have you been doing any retreats or anything here recently?
I have. I did the Tri-Cities, which I think, needs to go on the record as one of the best retreats I've ever been to. They run that thing so well. Yeah. And I'm just so impressed. Impressed with
Appalachian Regional, is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah. And they have the speakers were just hand in glove, and most of the time that's how it really does go. Sometimes it's a little different. Everybody's from a little different school of AA, and this one, everybody's from the same school. It was really, really great. And to be honest, I've got a couple coming up. Of course, the International's coming up, which is going to be a blast. And I'm going to be in Toronto the weekend before, so I'm just staying up in Canada for about a week and a half.
Nice.
And looking forward to seeing a bunch of friends I hadn't seen in a long time, and should just be a ball.
Yeah, sounds fun. That's cool. Are you speaking there this year?
No, not at the International. International's a whole different league, if you ask me. For my class, I shoot shotguns competitively, and when we go from master class to E, and I would consider myself an for international, I would be probably in the E class. So, I'm not making that cut.
Oh man, you do. I think you'd be freaking awesome. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's an incredible honor. I don't know if you went to the one. I can't remember if it was in San Antonio or in Atlanta, where they had the prisoner come and My God, first of all, you didn't know he was shackled. I don't know how he walked out
Wow.
so casual, and he was shackled. He had 4 years sober in prison,
Wow.
and the warden let him come. And I'm telling you, the guy knocked it out of the park. It was the most authentic AA talk ever. And
Wow.
and to be at international and do that, it's like, whoa, those are some cojones, man.
Yeah.
And of course, we're asking everybody. They're like, SWAT was everywhere, and because at the very end, he said that, they had allowed him to come out of prison to do this. And the crowd was just in awe.
Wow.
That would be a great talk for somebody to hunt down, because he
Nice.
was impressive. I have no idea what his name was, and I can't even remember which international it was, but he was spectacular.
Wow. That was special. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And I've never been. I've never been. I won't be able to make it this time neither, but maybe next time. What is it? Every 5 years?
Every 5 years. Yeah, it's on the zeros and the fives.
Yeah, yeah. I think the last one was supposed to happen during COVID, wasn't it? And they didn't have it.
Yeah, in Detroit, and unfortunately got canceled.
Yeah.
And we've been going to them for quite a while. I haven't been going since the beginning, but once Charlie and I got hooked into them, we were all about it. I just think it is such a amazing to have 60,000 drunks in an auditorium room, or some type of gymnasium, and they bring all the flags in and all the countries that AA's in. You just see it on such a level that you wouldn't normally see it on.
Yeah. Wow. Absolutely.
Very cool.
That is cool. That's cool. And for the listeners, we are, we've been doing a thing where this is a journey through the big book with KDP. And tonight we're doing steps 8 and 9. Super excited about this. I'm sure you got some great stories to share with us. Yeah.
I was telling you, Paul, is we could go really technical, because the book is very technical, because every amends is case sensitive. It really is. It's not just a blanket, oh, you took money from so and so, go pay them back. I mean, there's some real thought that needs to go into these, because it's a big deal.
Yeah.
There's the person doing the amends is uncomfortable. The person hearing the amends is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
This is not somebody's not slapping their forehead that you came to me to tell me you slept with my husband. And God knows I don't want to know it, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to drop that bomb. But I mean, that is an uncomfortable conversation. And, people are like, well, I think in those situations, let bygones be bygones. They said, if they knew you did, you owe the amends. If they didn't know you did, then that's questionable. And once again, I'm sure 100 people listen to this will have their own opinion, because it's a strongly case sensitive situation. And so I don't ever want to be the one who tells you must or mustn't. I'm like, hey, if it were me and I did this, I would take this into heavy prayer. Anytime the sexual situation comes up, that's a very, very dicey topic. And so actually, I don't have any on my list of what I want to talk about, but I do want to say that. That and money are very dicey. I can tell you, a guy stole my mother's wedding ring out of my jewelry box when he was putting a lock on my little apartment that I had, and I would like for that guy to come and bring me back that ring. I can tell you that. That would make my day.
Yeah.
And I would also be quite proud of him for coming back and telling me. But somebody may say, if they don't know it was you, it's not, I mean, you can do 100 things. I can tell you from my own personal, I'd like for you to come and make an amends to me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It clears the air. It really does. It's tough and it's uncomfortable. And, when do you write a letter? When do you do it, in person? Mark Houston was really big about in person. I'm not that big of in person. I think if you can, certainly that's the way to go. But that involves an air flight. Do you have the money? I mean, some people are deeply rigid on these amends, and some are a little bit more lackadaisical. And, I take each one of them, into some prayer and have them take it into prayer. And then we talk about it, and I give suggestions. And I don't, if somebody backs down and says, I don't want to do it, I got a little bit of pushback on that. I'm going to say, you know what? It said you'd go to any lengths for recovery. And this is the area where you're going to do pushback, is the amends process. And I can tell you, as somebody who came into the rooms of AA in 1984 at 26 years old, I owed so many amends, and I made 4. That was it. 4. Wow. It sustained my sobriety. I'm not proud to say that, but I also loved Alcoholics Anonymous. Somebody comes in that that has a ton of amends. They don't really like being an AA. They do before they pick up a drink. I'm not saying that's necessarily what they're going to do, but I can tell you it's very important that you do what is suggested. And I didn't. So I'm not going to sit here and be a hypocrite and make you do something that I didn't do, but I'm going to tell you the consequences you'll pay. And Charlie and I and Bob had also said this, Bob Bazans, is that, when we came into Alcoholics Anonymous on day one, we fell in love with the fellowship. And I just assumed everybody did. And that is a very unique group. And I love to ask that question at conferences of, 500 people and about 20 hands raised. And I just assumed all 500 loved AA on day one. I mean, that's how shallow minded we can be. I assumed if I did, then you must. Yeah. And, it's kind of an interesting thing. So the amends process is very sensitive. And sometimes I'll call 2 or 3 people I know and run it past them and ask their input, because I just don't want that blood on my hands. I don't know exactly what should be done here. And thank God that we all have people to call that have been doing this longer, have heard some darker stories and things like that. But the ones that I'm thinking that were my own personal ones was there's one I don't want to talk about just for the fact that it was so personal and so special that if the person ever heard it, I would think it would do them a disservice, because I just don't want to broadcast the experience. And that one I've always just left off of CD. I'll call you and you can call me and I'll be happy to tell you about it. But I've left it off of any audio only because it doesn't feel right to do it. So I'll share some other ones. I was 15 years sober when I was driving that school bus. And when I went over those humps and blew the valve stems off the back end of that bus, that bus boss, who was such a good man. God, he was just a solid, good man, family man. So it looked like he was a great son, looked like he was a great brother, a great husband, super nice guy. He knew that when he asked me what happened, I said, I don't know, because I couldn't lose that job. I mean, that was my medical insurance for Joe. Joe was a very sick man. I dang sure didn't set out to be a bus driver. No disrespect to any bus drivers out there, but my career choice was in the fitness business. Joe's career choice was a carpenter. Back then, HMOs were just being born, and catastrophic insurance is what you got when you were young. And that's about all we had was catastrophic. Well, what Joe had was he needed a bunch of medical testing. Well, falls under catastrophic, and we dang sure didn't have the money for that. So my girlfriend at my meeting suggested I go drive a school bus. Well, it happened to fit in like a hand in glove. And I said, well, I'll go do it because I'm a girl that gets stuff done. And I go down there and I think nothing of it. I really think I'm going to walk in. They're going to hire me. I'm going to do a couple of routes. We're going to get Joe's head scanned and we're going to be done here. Well, as most people have heard my story, I get on that bus and I am in way over my head. Oh my God, just a 20-hour testing was intense. What do you do with a pencil in the eye down to, you got to take a CDL license test. I mean, I was in so over my head at a time that was really, really challenging in my life. And as it turns out, Joe ended up having a brain tumor when we got the testing done, and it was very bad news. And I drove that damn bus for 3 years. Wow. I expected to drive it no more than, I really wanted to be done in 2 weeks, but I'd give it 6 weeks if I had to. And that was my plan. The plan going in fell apart. Yeah. And God made that thing amazing. And so when those valve stems blew off, I have to say this because it just pisses me off. I've had 2 men come up to me and tell me that is not a true story. And I look at them like, well, first of all, let's be very clear. You're calling me a liar. Yeah, okay. Yeah. This is not lost on me, dude. And, you work for Beechcraft or whatever airplane company, and that can't happen. It damn sure did. And if you'd like the guy's number that saw it, I'd be happy to give it to you to, prove to you. Oh, my God. And then the other guy was a little bit more respectful. He goes, I've never heard of that happening. And I said, well, You do now.
Yeah.
Okay. I blew the valve stems off the back end of the bus. And that bus boss, when he got the news and he came out, because I'm dead in the water, that bus ain't going anywhere. I mean, I got 4 flaps in the back. And he looked up that hill and looked down at those tires and he goes, "You don't know what happened?" I'm like, "No, sir, I don't." And I mean to tell you, I bald-faced lied to that man. And he let me keep my job. He never questioned it. And I owed him an amends right away. I really did. I needed to go into his office and sit him down and tell him I had lied. And there was no way I could do it. I was so scared that I would lose that job and we would not have medical insurance. And Joe had a brain tumor and he never really truly, I mean, it wasn't cancer, but he never truly recovered. And it was the rest of my storyline with Joe was just horrific and tragic. And it was 15 years later. I had 30 years sober.
Wow.
I did this at 15 years sober, 30 years sober before I went back to that man to apologize. And I couldn't find him. He was no longer at the bus yard. And then I had to tell a lie to the people at the bus yard to try to find him because I don't do any social media. And the way to spell his last name could have been 15 different ways to spell his last name. It wasn't like Bob Smith. And, the guy goes, "Well, now why exactly are you looking for him?" And I said, "Oh, well, it's Thanksgiving, and I want to tell him I'm so thankful." "Oh, it's terrible." Yes, so I lied to get an amends in, and and I mean, to me, it's like I would love for people in AA just to be real. I mean, we don't get sober and become saints. I mean, I probably wouldn't have drank with you if you did. I'm got a little rough around the edges, but this guy, he said, "Let me call him and I'll have him call you." And about 15 minutes later, he called me and he said, he gets on the phone and I just start kind of, telling him it's Thanksgiving and I'm trying to at least keep the lie alive. And he goes, "Katie," he called me Kate because I went by Miss Kate on the bus. He goes, "Kate, what are you calling me for?" And I said, "Oh, God." I said, "I'm calling about those valve stems." And I mean, he busted into a laugh that was uncomfortably painful to me. It was a nonstop man laugh where he just, ho, 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 ho. And I thought, "Oh my God." And at the very end, I said, and this was what the amends was, which I think is very important. I didn't want to apologize for lying. I wanted to apologize to putting him in a position where he knew I was lying and he covered for me.
Yeah.
This is a man of integrity and respect. And he was a good man. And I asked him to step outside his values when his job was to take care of those children on that bus. And he did that for me. That's what the amends was. Not that because I was lying and, or because I had lied.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, I could just cry talking about it. It was the most special amends ever." He said, "My mother just passed away and I quit the bus yard to be with her. My mother and I had a very special relationship." And he said, "You reminded me so much of my mom." And I personally took that as flattering. Some people would think, "Oh, I'm so old." I took it as I was so flattered. Yeah. And he said, "You reminded me so much of my mom." And I knew what your circumstance was, Katie. I knew Joe was sick.
Wow.
And there was no way I could make you pay that price. And I knew you'd never do it again. And he was absolutely right. I'd never do that again. I would never put those kids in that. I never knew I could blow the goddamn. I never knew the bus could climb that high. I had a gas bus. That sucker hauled ass. And I mean to tell you, it was like I backed it way down. And we talked for about 15 minutes. And he said, "You just restored my faith in humanity with this call."
Wow.
And it was spectacular. And it was 15 years later.
Wow.
15.
That's crazy.
I didn't do it 15 days later. I didn't do it 15 weeks later. I did it 15 years later. And it was one of the most remarkable experiences, which most speakers at the end of their talk, they end with a really moving amends story. I mean, it's really remarkable stuff, and we'll run from it. We'll hide from it. We'll talk ourselves out of never doing it. And myself included, don't get me wrong, but the truth of the matter is it's a remarkable experience. And then I had another one with my dad passed away before I was sober, and I had done such a lame amends to him I was fairly new sober, and we were fishing, and I just said, "Dad, my drinking caused you guys a lot of harm." Remember, I left home at 15. So I mean, that was a very weak way of putting it. And I said, "I'm really sorry." And that was all I said. And he said, he goes, "That's okay. Hand me another worm." And that was it. That was the amends. I checked it off the list. I did what they said. My dad and I always had a struggled relationship. It wasn't like we were going to hold hands and walk down the yellow brick road together. And my dad, unfortunately, called me before he was going in to have a pretty massive surgery. And we had a really good talk. Nothing in the amends, just a really good talk. And my dad and I struggled. Our relationship was extremely stressed. I always like to say you have the hardest time with the child you're most like. Wow. And my dad and I were cut from the same cloth, and we had troubles. And unfortunately, that surgery the next day went bad, and he died in the surgery at 71. And I was probably 16, 17 years sober, because Joe had already been diagnosed with this brain tumor. And at the funeral, I was so unruly. I mean, I was just a hot mess. I'm not this anymore. And I know that people laugh when I say this, but if you didn't see me 20 years ago, this is the most toned down version you will ever see of me. I mean, I was such a hothead, and I said something to my half brother my step brother that was so ugly during my dad's funeral. I mean, I was just so unruly. And when I came out of untreated alcoholism, and it was more into my 20 years of recovery, it took me about 4 years to come out of untreated alcoholism because I'm so stubborn. I'm so hard-headed. These rules do not apply to me. And I mean, I'm convinced, and needless to say, the tearing down of the ego piece by piece, and the more involved you get in this, you realize that you're just blowing smoke, that you really are in worse trouble than you think. And I must have been probably maybe 22, 23 years sober, and my heart started breaking about how poorly I treated my father. And my mom had died when I was young, so my stepmom, I had been pretty ugly to her, and I had written them out of my life because that's what we do, and we justify it. And I really believe that that's a unfortunate way to handle it, and I really deeply regretted it. And I had so much pain behind that at workshops, I couldn't even get through talking about my dad without bawling at every workshop. And I thought, oh, this is terrible. And my dad's died, and I've done there was no gravesite. He was cremated. I've done the letters. I've done the prayers. I've done everything. Nothing was working. And in prayer and meditation, I heard the still quiet voice say, go make an amends to your stepmother. Your dad loved her. Wow. Just that still and that quiet. And I thought, oh, no, I'm out of that life. I'm not doing that. And then it said it again the next day, and I dismissed it again. And I dismissed it in so delusionally. It wasn't like I sat there and went, absolutely not. I am not doing that. I just dismissed it because the voice is still and quiet, right? Well, by the third time, it got my attention, and it 3 days in a row. And wow. I thought, oh my God, are you kidding me? So I told Charlie, of course, sometimes that boy made me crazy. I told him what I was going to do, and she was living in San Antonio. And I said, and I hadn't seen her in 15, 20 years, long time. Wow. It was a long time. I'd written everybody off. And Charlie goes, well, now, the Cowboys they got their training camp down in San Antonio. I'm like, really, Charlie? You know my history. I'm going to go make an amends to my stepmother. And your first statement is the Cowboys training camp is there. I was like, oh, good Lord. I just couldn't believe it. And so I end up, I'm talking to Marty. I'm going down there. I'm a nervous wreck. She opens the door, and she is so much older than I anticipated she would be. And I was just floored. I mean, I just started crying, and I sat down, and I could not stop crying. Wow. I was overwhelmed with how horrible I had treated my family. I mean, horrible, just terrible, terrible, terrible. And she sat down, and I started, trying to talk while crying. It was very challenging. And then about, 5 minutes into it, she goes, oh, Kate, stop it. She goes, your father loved you. I loved you. This pain you put yourself through. And she was absolutely right. And I listened to what she had to say, and I quit the hysterical crying. I'm not a big fan of that's not necessarily the right way to do an amends, but hey, I was doing the best I could with the tools I had. And we had a lovely day, and I get in the car to come back home, and I made the mistake of calling Charlie, and I couldn't wait to tell him what happened. He goes, I tell him everything, right? And he goes, did you go by the training camp? And I said, I'm going to go ahead and call Marty because I'm going to take your head off when I get home. And I swear that is what my man did. And I said, oh, okay, you gotta know who to tell the story to. First off, okay, this was Marty goes, honey, that's not new information. You knew that. That's fair enough. So I called Marty and cried and talked to her about it and everything. And then the beautiful part of this that I didn't realize would happen was it opened the door for me to go make amends to my stepsister and stepbrother, and they were so kind, so kind. And then I got invited to weddings, and I took one of my grandsons with me, and he comes running in the room, and he goes, Graham, I have cousins. I know. I kept you from all of them. I mean, it was just so awesome, so awesome. And that's the thing I love. We have a good relationship. It's not super close, but it's good. If I called and said I needed them, they'd be here. And if they called me and said they needed me, I'd be there.
Nice,
It's so spectacular to be able to have that freedom. And I'm telling you, I have not ever bawled my eyes out anymore over my father and I's relationship. I healed it because, God said he was crazy about her and you need to go clean it up with her.
Wow, that's powerful.
That was directly from my dad. There's just no doubt about it.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful.
And those were my two really big amends. Charlie made an amends to me for a lot of the heartache he had caused in the beginning of our relationship. And trust me, I was no saint. I caused plenty of problems too, but this was him doing an amends to me. And he had left many things off the list of what he had done. And I've the longer I'm sober, the more I see the necessity to say what we have done and make amends for the actions, and then when not to do that. Because it's interesting, I'm kind of in this new frame of mind that if you go, because somebody had come to me with an amends for their sister, and they went through the list of all the heartaches they'd caused the sister, and the sister was mad. And she said, I am aware of all of those. And I thought, I think there's a time where we don't have to list all the harms we've caused, but we need to come at them with how that made them feel when we caused these harms. And I think that's a very important piece that we leave out. And so I was doing an amends with a friend of mine on her daughter. And when I said, I want you to write it out and read it to me. Not necessary that you're going to read it to her, but I think that, we got to see what you got on there. And she read it to me, and it felt too much like we had been talking about, right? That you don't want to just list all the harms you've caused, and they lived it, they know it. Yeah. And so I said to her, she made it so much more personal that when she read it to me, I was so moved. I asked her if I could read some of it, and I believe she said, she's not contacted me back, so I'm just going to give you some pieces of it because it was just so spectacular. The heartfelt, instead of the specifics, it was more of the heartfelt stuff. So she says things like, at a young age, my actions robbed you of all your stability, security. See, that's what I think we need to do. Yeah. I moved you so many times and disrupted your life. You had to go to different schools. You had to do this. See, I think we need to get into the emotion of what we've done to these children and these siblings instead of the list of stuff, that we did, because they lived it with us. They're aware of it. So she's given me the permission to send this letter to people to read, because it was such a good foundational letter, but I waited too late in the game today to ask her if I could read it. So I don't want to just assume she'd say yes. So if anybody wants to get in touch with me and get this letter, it's pretty spectacular. And, that's the kind of stuff that I think when it comes to family members, Charlie's list of things, he had come to me with the list, and then I realized he'd left so much off. And it was like, oh, Charlie, our relationship in the beginning for the first 4 years was just tumultuously bad. I mean, bad, 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 bad. Screaming fights, breaking up, yada, yada, yada. It was tough. And we were in our 40s, and it was embarrassing. It was publicly embarrassing in AA. And, little did I know God had a plan that we were to, both wake up and do a lot of work in AA. Unbeknownst to me, we tried to kill each other. So we had no idea that this was the plan. But he said to me, he goes, if you'd like to make a list of anything I left off, please do. And I said, well, I certainly will. Well, little did I know that he thought he meant a week. And by about 6 months, I was adding to that list every time I had a thought go on in my mind. And he goes, that's stupid of me to do. He goes, I said, oh, it's on the list. And he goes, on the list? I said, yeah, you told me I could write a list. He goes, that had like a week expiration date. It's been 6 months. I go, well, I've been adding to it. And like you say, my sponsor didn't know about it. Nobody knew about it. It's my secret little list.
That's funny.
And so we had to sit down, and there were 32 items on that list. Wow. 32. And he said that every one of them was a legitimate harm, and they never made his list. Wow. And they were a legitimate harm. And what happened that was so shocking, and women can really relate to this. We are the deep thinkers, the deep feelers, the deep this, the deep that. And you guys can, A plus B equals C, no disrespect to that statement, but we're jealous of that. I wish I didn't have to go so deep and feel it and then relive it and then have to talk to 10 people about it. I mean, that's just the way women are wired. And you guys, you can say F you to each other and go have lunch that afternoon. I mean, it's a different way of living. And I will tell you, we're jealous. We wish we could have more of that, but we don't. Wow. And so what happened is when I got to read that list to Charlie, that Rolodex in my head, that every time he hurt my feelings, I went back to that Rolodex and just flipped through the damn thing. And it was gone. And it was remarkable. I mean, it was gone. Wow. And so then years into our relationship, I said to him, you know what? I might need to write another list. And he goes, do it. And then he goes, do it every month if you need to. I go, hey, Dodo, you're supposed to change. I'm not supposed to just keep a list of all the things that bug the crap out of me. Start working on changing it. He was, he got such a kick out of that. But do it every month. That was Katie and Charlie.
That's funny. Yeah.
That's not well, and you probably understand the amends process. It's so sensitive. It's case sensitive.
Yeah. I tell you, I heard Charlie talk on one, and I've heard that story. I love that story, the Rolodex. I heard Charlie talking about, I think it was his sister that he was going to make an amends to. He'd stole some money out of her purse. And I don't remember all the details, but he said when he went up to her and mentioned it, she was like, whoa, hold on a second. Like you did, like she just started naming off like all the emotional stuff he did to the family, in and out of jail, did all this, did this. And she was like, can you here to give me $50 that you took out of my wallet or my purse one day? And I love sharing that story with my sponsees because, man, that changes everything. Like I often wonder, I think like obviously the longer I stay sober, like the more I can start seeing that stuff. Plus, like, I think whenever you go, when I walk away from an amends and they've shared stuff with me that I didn't have any clue about, like my experience changes from then on out, right? And I'm also kind of curious quite often, like how often this stuff happens where I'm stepping on people's toes and I'm not sure about, where not even aware of it, right?
Oh, I'm telling you, I think it happens all the time.
Sure.
And once you crack the egg on somebody, and you start to go deeper and deeper and deeper with them, or if they do it to you as a sponsor, and you see that behavior, and you go, oh, I guarantee they're doing this all in the world. Yeah. There's so much that all that therapy that I went in, and I'll never knock it. I think therapy's a privilege, but I can tell you that the tough part of what I did is learn how to take something much deeper and go as deep as you can with it, because I guarantee when it says, where were we thoughtless, inconsiderate, and dishonest? I mean, in the evening review, there's very little that says, what a swell guy you were. How did everybody just be grateful you came to the party? And the truth is the reason for that is because the level the level of self-centeredness, and some people just do not like to hear this. And I just say, hey, then don't listen to it.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm going to hear it, man. I'm telling you that I'm working with a sponsee right now that is waking up to some behavior, and it's been painful. And she's cut from the same cloth I am. And I'm like, man, we are used to getting our way.
Yeah.
And, but the person that's the ego turned inward that just cries all the time, can be the same problematic around people. So don't fool yourself. You may not be the yeller that's getting the attention of everyone, but you could be the crier or the depressive type that, that when you walk in the room, it's so heavy. Yeah. And that's tough for families to be around. It just is.
Yeah. I'll tell you also, when you'll start seeing, especially like after you've been sober for a little while, and you have family members or people that, sponsees or just different people you meet in the program that you form a relationship with, and you see all the pain they put people through. And it's crazy because at a certain level, it's like for people, our loved ones, our closest loved ones that love us dearly our whole lives, like in order to help someone with the illness I had all those years, it's painful for that person, right?
And remember, if you believe that alcoholism is a genetic bullet, that self-centeredness came at birth.
Yeah.
That one to have the, have all the attention, or the one that sat in the corner. I mean, it's a tough personality to work with.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. 100%.
I got two more. These were just, one of my sponsees gave me permission to read these, and I think they're so perfect for, the book talks about in the third step, behind a kind motive, right? And sometimes behind a kind motive, we'll say, hey, somebody's going to go have surgery. Hey, if you need any help, I'm here. And we say that because we want to look swell. We really don't want to take them up, them to take us up on it. Right?
Yeah.
And so my sponsee did this to somebody that was going to have surgery. And I believe that the person said, yeah, I would appreciate it if you'd walk my dogs. Well, she didn't. I haven't read the letter in a while, so we'll hear the amends, because this chick was pissed. She did not do what she said. She asked, hey, Izzy, hang on. She asked, if she could, help in any way. And then when the girl said, yes, can you do this? She just bailed on her. And it says, I want to apologize to you for the way I showed up in our relationship a couple of years ago. So it took her a couple of years to make this amends. I want all those earmarks, right?
Yeah.
You don't get to just say, oh, it's been 10 years, I don't want to do it. You got to do it. Magic happens. Because it was during a time when you were going through some serious and frightening back surgeries. I was simply the producer of confusion rather than harmony, and I really let you down when I dropped by your apartment one afternoon to visit. By all accounts, I led you to believe I was someone you could count on, someone who would be there for you in times of need. During the course of our visit, I asked you what I could do to help you, and you said specifically that you needed someone that could come by, walk the dogs, and perhaps make a trip to the grocery store during the week. I told you that I would help you where I could. However, I never followed through with my effort at all to help you. I made a few lame inquiries via text. Okay, let the world hear that. The weenie way of doing things is texting. I'm not a fan. I've made that clear to the world, which was nothing more than a self-centered effort to manage my reputation.
Wow.
I wanted to be seen as a kind and helpful friend, but all I gave you were words unwilling to back up with any action.
Wow.
My behavior was thoughtless and inconsiderate. I was only thinking of myself. I know this was deeply hurtful to you, and you rightfully let me know. You told me the truth about my behavior, and you were absolutely right to do so. This apology is long overdue, and I want to tell you that I sincerely regret my actions. I take 100% responsibility for the harm I needlessly created you at a most critical time in your life. I hope you are well, and I'm wishing you all the good things in your life. And she did not hear from her.
Wow.
And I think that's important to know, because I think they ran into each other. It's been like a while since I've read this letter, but I mean, did you see how well worded that was?
Wow.
What she did?
Yeah, I love how she added the to protect my reputation. Right? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
There you go. And I'm telling you what, I told her, I said, please let me read these out loud. And she said, I'd be happy for you too.
Yeah.
And then this was, I can't remember the beef that she had with the sponsee, but this is the other one. Says, I owe you an apology for the way I spoke to you several months ago, specifically the day that I let you know I would no longer be able to sponsor you. I addressed you in a berating manner with a downright scolding tone. This did nothing but put a wedge between us and render me totally ineffective in an exchange that might have otherwise been helpful. I came at you angry, shaming you as though I was morally superior. I'm sure you must have felt like a scolded child. It was not my place, and I was wrong to have talked to you that way. Driven more by my self-centered need to prove my position,
Wow.
I lost true respect, and I hit you with a damaging, self-righteous fueled bombardment of angry words. You did not deserve that, and I'm truly sorry that I left you with this kind of sting and ugly impression. How self-centered of me to be thinking only of me and protecting my so-called reputation. There was a possibility, an opportunity perhaps, for me to be helpful to you that day, but it was lost in my efforts to manage on the basis of my will. This I deeply regret because what you needed most at that time, I failed to give you.
Wow.
Perhaps I have left you with a sour perception of the role of a sponsor, and if so, I certainly couldn't blame you. And I take full responsibility for leaving you with what must have been nothing short of a very bad taste in your mouth. I'm open to hearing from you further in regards to how this impacted you. I have thought of you often, knowing you are facing some serious and frightening circumstances. If you would like to bring me up to date on your progress, I would welcome the opportunity to hear from you and how you are coming along presently. And she did hear from her, and they really mended their ways.
Wow. Holy crap. Wow.
Yeah. See, I mean, that's
powerful. On the basis of my will. Wow.
And these letters can be so powerful. And sometimes people are like, it's got to be face to face. And let me tell you, when it comes to making an amends, both people are very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I kind of wish I'd have left my stepmom a letter that was more me in my heartfelt instead of the bellowing crying that I did. But, I didn't have, at the time, it never occurred to me to do something like what Kelly did. And I would have actually asked Kelly to help me write these letters because they're just so powerful.
Yeah.
And I think that we lose sight sometimes of, I've heard people say, my sponsor just hung up on me. I've never been a fan of that. I just think that's just not, I just am not a fan of that. I think that's, now don't get me wrong. I can be disturbed and angry and frustrated, but we're going to have a conversation because that's the role I've assigned myself. I am here to try to help you. And if you're balking, I'll let you have your experience, be it good or bad.
Yeah.
But if I start shaming the crap out of you, I just don't think that's a healthy way to sponsor. And, everybody has their own dance and that, and I'm tough, but I am considerate. I'd like to believe that I am considerate. And I've certainly stepped on the toes of some sponsees before too. And hopefully I've mended my ways with all of them. But, you usually you go through that evangelical stage and you come out, I'm right, they're wrong. Yeah. I've got this understood, and then you go, okay, maybe I need to tone that down a little bit.
Yeah. And also, one thing that keeps showing up over this past year was when you start learning how to apply the principles and the traditions, to a lot of this stuff. There would be situations where my need to be right is the most important stance in this whole situation. And that's causing an issue. Yep. Right. And at the end of the day, it's unity is what we're really trying to aim towards. Right. But not always, not when I'm in that stance, right? Not when I'm in that position. I thought also that we were talking earlier about, that spiritual consent that Charlie, that letter that he had wrote, it's talking about the same thing, when you're approaching a sponsee or whoever in that manner, having, certain words have you considered this or have you done that, instead of just being so
consideration.
Yeah. Which is
the path of consideration is when you say I have a consideration for you, the rule, for lack of a better term, is that you don't get to say anything so that the ego can't respond.
Wow.
So if you say, I'd like to offer you a consideration, and if you say yes, you have the right to say no. Yeah. But if you say yes, you don't get to respond because the ego so badly wants to respond immediately to whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that's all Mark Houston stuff. The Path of Consideration kind of came out of Steel on Steel, I believe.
Yeah.
And Charlie, it worked well in our marriage, but you couldn't use it too terribly often.
Hmm.
Because oh boy, it was like, okay, you used it 3 times last week. I'm about done with your Path of Consideration. So I said, no, I'm not willing to consider what you got. And I'll tell you something personal about the traditions. My sponsor is very big in using the traditions and tying them into the steps. And I'm not as sharp as she is in that field. She's really sharp. And I wrote a piece of inventory, and she says, it feels like I can't even remember, forgive me for not having the quote in this tradition of prestige, property, prestige, and something else.
Yeah.
She goes, it sounds to me like that's been threatened. And I mean, she handed my ass to me. And I mean, it was like, oh my God, Marty, I woke up at 3:00 in the morning mad at what she was giving me. And I thought, and I called her the next day. I said, look, I've written the inventory and I need to come out there as soon as possible and read it, because this one has rubbed me very, very deep.
Wow.
And she, I was very disappointed in somebody, and she was trying to get me to see, which is what her job is, how I'm a hypocrite. And I got a lot of the same character traits this person has, and I did not want to hear it. Did not want to hear it. And so Friday I'll go there and just eat as much crow as I possibly can because I respect her deeply, and she will tell me the truth. And so it's so interesting how I don't know how we get through this stuff. And as much as I want to hold on to something, and then somebody offers me an opportunity to let it go, and I fight the opportunity, and then I finally get sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I swallow and digest large chunks of truth about myself, and then I get freedom.
Amen.
And it happens every time. And yet sometimes I'll balk. I don't balk every time, but I can certainly balk.
Oh yeah. Same. Yeah. It's amazing that we actually have the desire for living like this. It's unbelievable that what comes from doing all this stuff, right? It's
the gift we have is incredible.
It's unbelievable. It's also, I'm going to say sad. I'm not sure that's the right word, but like other people don't have it. It's like it's crazy. We're blessed. I remember my first grant sponsor used to always talk about being blessed. He was an alcoholic. At this point, he's 30 years sober, and he's, talking about how the blessing that comes from, what we have in this. And I realize today it's, what he's talking about is, we have a program of action and we have my life is dependent on my relationship with the power, right? And what's standing in the way of that, right? What's blocking that from happening? And which other people, I don't even have a freaking clue what this, we're even, most of the time don't even, I'm not sure about everyone, but a lot of people don't even begin to consider some of this stuff. I love what Charlie used to always say. He'd say, she's not against that. I think he was talking about, his mom, I believe. He was like, she's not against the idea of apologizing. It's just never came up for her, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, let me tell you. That girl was unique.
I get that. I completely get that, right? Man.
If I wasn't on recording, I got another phrase I like to use, but it's not very respectful, and I loved her, but she's tough. She's a tough broad.
Yeah.
She did not see that. Hey, now you know what? I just got my text from my girl that said I can read her daughter's letter.
Nice.
And this is a doozy. I'm so grateful she said it. It's and keep in mind she had CPS had come into her life twice.
Wow.
She had 3 kids at the time. They were young. They were in shelters a few times. I mean, it was a very, very rough childhood for these kids. And when we did the inventory, it was really, I love her so much. And she had to really swallow and digest a lot. And I didn't want to lose sight of what a great mother she is. So I want that to be first and foremost, because when I'm just going to get so emotional reading this letter because it's so spectacular. It says, to my beautiful daughter. Now, this daughter is now 21, and she's pretty mad at her mom. And she's got every right to be mad at her mom. Her mom, it was a tough life she had. And now she's 21, and mom is 6 years sober and having a good life, and the kid didn't get that. right? So, I mean, come on, I could be either person in this play. I could be the mother or I could be the kid. It says, I've done some deep damage to our relationship over a lifetime. I am hoping you will give me a chance to talk to you about that sometime. At a young age, my actions robbed you of your stability, your safety, and your security. You had to live through my addiction/alcoholism. Your security was disrupted. We moved. I lost jobs. You had to live with your grandfather because I was an unfit mother. All of that must have been so scary for you. When you and your brother returned to me, I had another child, and you did not get the proper attention you deserved. There was an undercurrent of abuse and drug usage happening through those years. Your whole world was turned upside down again, and we had left again when we left that situation. It was a confusing time for you, and you were robbed of your innocence on this roller coaster I put you on. I wasn't the mother you deserved. As you know, I entered the beginning years of my sobriety. I did not show up the way you needed me to. I brought guys in and out of our house, sleeping when I was not at work or in meetings. I was selfish and inconsiderate. You went through a lot, and at that point, and I add another child to the mix, which took what little I had to give to you and made it even worse.
Wow.
I hurt you in many ways during your lifetime. You deserved better. In many ways, I failed you. From the bottom of my heart, I want to make things right. I love you. You are my child. You are a part of me. I am proud of your strength and your endurance. You have done well for yourself in this life. I would really like to be a part of your life and be the loving and supportive mother you deserve. Whew.
Wow.
I mean, you see how she didn't just list the things she did wrong.
Yeah.
She listed them with an emotion.
Yeah.
And that is so important, because if you lived through that life she's talking about, you're like, yeah, I was there. Thank you. Appreciate you. Glad you saw that, because that's the attitude we have.
Wow.
It's like, let's talk about the heartfelt emotion. And this girl has 5 kids, and she's a remarkable mother. She started very young having children too, which just really, when she was telling me the whole story, it was so impressive. That at that young age she opted to keep the child and raise it, and it was just unbelievable. And that's not the child that's upset. It's the third born of the 5. And she was the one who has made her mom pay, which would have been me. I would have been that kid. I would have been the kid that said, "Oh yeah, forgive you, forget it. Yeah, glad you got your life together today. You didn't have it when I was little."
Yeah.
See what I mean? I mean, there's so much to be said in what we get 5 years sober, and all of a sudden we want the family to throw us a ticker tape parade, and they're still licking their wounds. The book says 20 years of drinking will make a skeptic out of anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't just go, oh, yippee-yi-yo-ki-yay, you're sober.
Yeah.
Some families may do that, but
it's so powerful, the whole emotion side of it. It's because like when you're sitting there in front of another person and you're explaining it like that, or just in a letter or whatever, those emotions right there, that's a game changer. It's like
game changer.
Wow.
When she read me this letter, I mean, I was bawling. It was just so moving. I told her, I said, I am so proud that you saw all of that. And we also know it's a long road to reconstruction ahead.
Yeah.
We must take the lead.
Yeah.
We leave that line out.
Yeah.
We have to take the lead on this stuff.
Yeah, there's that prayer it says right there in the amends, and I think it's 83, where he says, the reason our family is probably doing this stuff is because something we've done in the past. And it says each morning we ask our Creator to show us the way of patience, kindliness, tolerance, and love. And man, it's powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Heck, it even says to pray for the man who is still sick. I can't tell you that I have ever done that for somebody that's drinking. And Bill, he was the one who he thought of thousands of people that could use this program. I mean, there were so many selfless acts that I heard. I thought, I don't know that I would have done that. Maybe God, if God chose me for that, maybe I would have heard it differently. But I mean, to tell you, that is, that to keep praying for the man who's still suffering. Maybe some people do that every morning and on awakening, but it rarely hits my radar. I'm praying about the people I know, and for me and but for the man who's still sick, I can promise you, in 40 years that has not crossed my train of thought. And I don't mean that as a good or bad. I'm just saying that's just not on my radar.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Me being, selfish, self-centered, I only do that whenever it's affecting me in some way. It's like, wow, there we go. Right?
Yeah, old Jim sitting next to me in the meeting's kind of bugging the crap out of me. Maybe I'll say a prayer for him.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that one. Well, I tell you what, I got in like I told you, my stuff was rolling downhill, and I've got 2 calls I got to make before I hit the hay. So I think I'm going to call it a night. But
Thank you so much.
I really enjoyed this.
I have loved it. Yeah, I love it. Now, and for all the listeners, next week, next Wednesday, let's see, June 11th, we are going to be doing step 10. Super excited about that. Thank you so much, Katie. And I will be staying in touch with you this week.
You bet, Paul. Thanks again.
Have a good night.
Okay.
Hello. Thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.